Honorable Minister, or Deputy Premier, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Armin Penn, and I wish to welcome you to our celebration of International Museum Day. Here in the Virgin Islands, we're going to make it throughout the week. I wish to invite the students of Bragado School to sing what today we call our territorial song, and anyone in the audience who knows is welcome to join in.
Out of the huts of history, Spain, our ancestors bled and died. But with strength and with power we overcame to restore the Virgin Islands' pride, to restore the beauty we devise a plan, to attain ownership of your precious land. Educating your people is a golden key to maintain the success of this territory. Oh, how radiant are your daughters, and how wealthy are your sons. Your beaches boast your beauty, and your success is second to none. Green and brilliant are your hillsides, they replenish our hopes and pride. Oh, beautiful Virgin Islands, your qualities can never be denied. May God richly bless this territory. May we ask three things of these: courage for our great leaders, that they may rule our destiny. We ask for wisdom for our people, that they may live in harmony. And understanding for our children, that they may cherish this legacy. Oh, how radiant are your daughters, and how wealthy are your sons. Your beaches boast your beauty, and your success is second to none. Green and brilliant are your hillsides, they replenish our hopes and pride. Oh, beautiful Virgin Islands, your qualities can never be denied. Oh, beautiful Virgin Islands, your qualities can never be denied.
I now wish to invite our Chief Cultural Officer, Ms. Anne Leonard, to do a talk.
In our quest to rebuild, as we say, stronger, greener, better, it is hoped that there will be an increased focus and funding for institutions of these kinds. For those of you who may not know too much about International Museum Day, it was first established by the International Council of Museums in 1977, and it has gained momentum ever since. It was mentioned that in 2018, international museums across the world amounted to over 40,000 celebrating this occasion from 152 countries, including these Virgin Islands. So we're very pleased to be part of this observation because we know museums play a very important role in our society. Museums are just not four walls or building or places that old people like to go and look at old things. We wish that a new generation, and we are harvesting a new generation here this morning by inviting students like yourselves to fall in love with museums as we have fallen in love with it. I know you've fallen in love with social media. Many of you probably have your own Facebook pages and WhatsApping your friends, you name it. And we have a little surprise for you this morning to make you fall in love with museums as we ourselves love them. This year's theme is Museum as Cultural Hubs, the Future of Tradition. So in keeping with the theme, the Department of Culture, we are pleased to introduce for the first time a virtual museum tour which enables persons to utilize today's technology to visit a museum. In other words, if you cannot go to the museum, with the click of a button, the Maritime Museum at Lavity Stoutt Community College comes to you. This technology comes at an opportune time for us as we work to introduce young persons like yourselves in our community to fall in love, as I said, with our museums. I appreciate and wish to thank the individuals who continue to work with me every year to make this celebration a success. The planning committee includes Ms. Bernadine Louis of HLSCC, Ms. Ormin Penn of the Sugar Works Museum, Ms. Carol Vanderpool of Her Majesty's Prison Museum, Ms. Joanne Hill from our department, previously of the VI Folk Museum, Mrs. Olive Vanderpool of Genesis Studio, Mr. Stefan McTavius, and Ms. Berta McKelly of the Department of Information and Public Relations. I'd particularly like to mention as well assistance provided by Ms. Julia Smith, my assistant at the office. I'd like to mention as well the Long Look Heritage Committee who've put on an exhibition this week in observation of International Museum Week here in the territory. I end with sharing one of my favorite quotes on this occasion by Nanette Avery, and I quote, "To preserve our past is to save our future. To preserve our past is to save our future." Thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for being here with us this morning.
I hope you're finding what's being said most useful and instructive in terms of what you as young people will plan to do with your lives and the life of the community in which you live, anywhere around the world actually. I now wish to invite the president of the H. Lavity Stoutt Community College, this college, to give us a short talk.
A short talk indeed I will give. I wish to welcome everyone to HLSCC. I'm not very comfortable this morning because our repairs are far from done, and I know the minister is here, so it's good to have him with us. Honorable Natalia Wheatley, I take pleasure in saying this, Minister of Education and Culture, and all the other things that have been added. Miss Anne Leonard, my good friend and director, manager of culture, I'm not too sure. And we have Mrs. Penn here with us, who is also representing, and all the other members and leaders of the other museums. I'm staying very casual on this and not too formal. No one has to ask me to visit a museum. In fact, whenever I travel, going to a museum is one of the high points of my visit to any country. My most fascinating visit to a museum has been in Panama, where I visited a maritime museum. And there was glass all around. There was all the historical animals that were in Panama, that were underwater, that traveled to the mainland in America. They swam up there. But they had all their, what do we call that, portraits of them there. Then there was an active one This one was all glass, and in there you are just surrounded by water all around you, like ocean, as though you're under the ocean in a submarine. And the fishes of all kinds are swimming around you and above you. I have to say, as old as I am, I was a little nervous when the floor began to shake and water, the noises of the water started to take place. And I looked and I saw these great white sharks coming under my feet and up in the roof and all around me. And I said to my son, "Are you sure this thing is safe?" But there was not much time to think of safety because there were so many interesting things happening. And I know that we are surrounded by water. And soon, Mr. Minister, we will not have to go to take our students to our children to St. Thomas, to the aquarium, but we will start at some point with a smaller representation of our underwater life. I'm saying that in the ears of the minister. He has 4 years to start, so Mr. Minister, it's a lot for you. Museums. Museums contain our history. We are fast becoming a people in the Virgin Islands where we are forgetting who we are. I bring it to you today and I charge you, young people, with paying attention to what you can learn today at this museum day, the opening. It's not just a day for you to attend and I see refreshments coming in. We wish you to remember that you were founded, you and these beautiful, beautiful Virgin Islands were founded on history. I will share a quotation with you from Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey says, "A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture are like a tree without roots." My question to you then, what are your roots? What do you hold there? What do you hold there as young people, as students? What do you remember most about the history? Do you remember Hurricane Irma? You were here. What did you see in Hurricane Irma that made you grow roots? And even now, as the country is coming back, you can look around and say, "Oh my goodness, we are growing back. We are growing back." I look around every day and I see the mangroves that look so dry at the top. But I did some research. I thought they were dead. And then I did research because I am very keen on the environment. And I'm told that those mangroves are not dead. They are growing back. So in a few years or before, maybe by the end of next semester, we will be able to invite you here by schools, or we will come to your school to educate you on the growth of the mangrove. I'm very feverish, my staff and I, on marine studies education. When we get a little bit deeper next semester, we will be coming around to you or having you back. So teachers, we invite you. Our museum here, we want to take it to another level. It's marine studies, but it's also maritime studies in another way. We have just, with the help of the DAI, the RDA, restored our fire simulator. So that will be another place for you to come and visit. maybe by then, not maybe, we have to by then, Mr. Minister, have the proper gears. So we wouldn't put fire in it though. So you can go down and experience what it's like to be in a fire simulator. So you will get a whole lesson then on maritime studies. You will get a whole lesson on marine studies. Mr. Minister, we are committed to that. And I have another quote I'll share with you. If you don't know history, Michael Crichton says, then you don't know anything. You're a leaf that doesn't know it is part of a tree. You are a leaf that doesn't know it is part of a tree. We know that you're here today because you are learning history, and you are a leaf that will know that you are part of a tree. You are part of the history of your country, the Virgin Islands. Thank you.
It's very interesting how each of our speakers has taught us what the word museum means. I just wish to extend what they have been telling us, museums, to say that let us think of what we see on our landscape and our seascape in the Virgin Islands, and anything at all that's there that has made a profound impact on our socio-economic life is a museum. Dr. Vanderpool spoke specifically of the Maritime Museum in Panama. We've had a few Virgin Islanders who've gone there and have helped build the Panama Canal. She was telling you that many of the animals swam north because obviously they were escaping from this cutting away of the landform. But museums are really, as I've said, anything at all on our landscape or our seascape that has had an socio-economic impact on the way that man uses that particular thing. That's what a museum is. So when we think, for example, of the copper mine on Virgin Gorda, I remember my last visit down to Garden Creek on Virgin Gorda. There was a little rowboat. I hope you all don't throw it away. Someday maybe you'd be able to use it in some way as an example of the kind of boat that we would use to serve our bigger boats. On Anegada, as you know, if you ever see a yawler, please save it. Because Anegada's waters were so shallow, one of our shipwrights, along with one of his trainees on Anegada, had to actually create a particular kind of boat that they call the yawler in order to be able to pole. You know, poling is different from rowing. When you pole, you push your boat like this. When you row, you row. This is the movement for rowing. So this rowboat here would be rowed, but a yawler, distinctive in the Virgin Islands, unique in the world, you would pole. So there are examples of museums of the Virgin Islands. I wish now to call on our Honorable Deputy Premier to give us a talk. I know he has a genuine interest in this subject matter. And as our Chief Cultural Officer said, Honorable Minister, we've just recently begun to celebrate International Museum Day in the Virgin Islands. This is your first time as Minister to do so, and I hope that you're going to enjoy the week.
I want to let you know how much of a pleasure it is for me to be here with you this morning, especially with you, the students. I have a challenge this morning because we have the audience here, and then we also have the cameras here which will broadcast to a broader audience. And sometimes it's difficult to to speak to a young audience and an older audience at the same time. But I'll begin with my young persons. I want to have a focus on you. You are sitting there, very well behaved, attentive, but sometimes I wonder if they're bored sitting here. Just a little bored? And all of this talk about museums sometimes seems very boring. But I would like to bring it across to you in a different way. I'm sure you've watched cartoons. You guys like your Netflix that you can watch on your tablets and so on and so forth. I'm sure some cartoon that you were watching before, or you have watched, had the concept of a time machine. Do you ever, students, wish that you can get into a time machine and travel back to the past?
Yes.
Well, thank you for that. Maybe we can convince you differently, young person, and thank you for your honesty. But museums allow us to travel to the past. And I went to the British Museum before. And just like Mrs. Vanterpool said, when I travel, I go to museums. And perhaps you haven't had an opportunity to go to a museum outside of the British Virgin Islands. But these are very interesting places. I'll give you an example. Thousands of years ago, persons living in places like Africa used to build these big statues without the use of all the modern equipment that we have today. You ever heard of pyramids? Yes. You ever heard of the Sphinx? No. Okay, the Sphinx is a big statue. It's a big statue. But the structures are so huge, the toe, just the toe of the statue alone, is probably up to the roof. Just the toe alone. And imagine how these structures were built. Persons still don't know. You would see that type of thing in a museum. I've had the opportunity to travel to museums in Paris, or a famous one they call the Louvre. I've traveled to museums in Berlin. I've traveled to museums in Africa, in Ghana. And let me tell you, they're exciting places. And I believe, I'm not too familiar with the virtual museum tour. I believe that the virtual museum, through the use of technology, will allow you students to be able to experience museums around the world and even museums right here in the BVI. So I won't speak too long because I want you to get to that exciting part. Yes? But think about our past. And if you want to be educated, you need educational institutions like schools and colleges. If you want to help sick persons, you need health institutions like hospitals and clinics. If you're dealing with money matters, you need economic institutions like banks. So whatever we want to do in our society, we have to build institutions to be able to do that work. And a museum is a cultural institution. And in the BVI today, we have persons from many different countries, probably over 100 different, over 115 different countries here in the BVI. Persons who come from places with lots of different cultures. And we have persons growing up here, and we want to ensure that we have a strong BVI culture. It's very important. So all of you young persons sitting down here, we want you to take lots of interest of what happened in the Virgin Islands in the past. This is the Maritime Museum, right? Sailing is very important to the survival of our people. Because guess what? Before we had all of these modern conveniences, right? Before we had financial services and tourism, how did we survive? How did we feed our families? How did we build our homes? A big part of our economy was taking a boat. Look at that boat right there. Yes. A big part of our economy was going out there in the ocean and fishing for fish. And not just that, we would sail over to St. Thomas. Can you imagine sailing over to St. Thomas in a boat like that? You can't imagine it? Our people had to do that. Did you know that? They had to load up these boats with their fish, their provisions, in some instances, livestock. And we had to sail over to St. Thomas. They even had a place in St. Thomas called, what did they call it? Is it Tortola Wharf? Tortola Wharf. Because we had to go over there to sell our food in exchange for money, to come back over to the BVI and feed our families. We had to go to the Dominican Republic and Cuba and cut cane. There were lots of things that used to happen here for us to survive. We didn't have microwaves. Yeah? We had brick ovens. Yeah? We had coal pots. You know about that? Perhaps maybe during the hurricane you experienced some of this. In the aftermath of the hurricane, with no electricity. Can you imagine living without electricity? So this is why we have museums, because we give you, young people, who did not have an opportunity to experience this type of life, an opportunity to learn all about it. And what we're going to do, and I heard Madam President of HLSCC encourage me in a few areas, and we're going to be working on a lot of these different areas. But one area we're going to look at is building a grand institution, a national museum. Make sure we have lots of space so we can have exhibitions on Hurricane Irma. We can have exhibitions even on our cultural village, how our cultural village used to look like. We have a room showing documentaries where you can learn from the older persons in the community about all the basket weaving they used to do, or how they all the toys they used to make out of the trees, yeah, and out of stones and things like that. Because of course we didn't have Nintendo, yeah, and we didn't have PlayStation 2. So what did we do to have fun, the children? We created nice games, and we had more fun than y'all have fun right now. And we're very healthy, and we had great relationships with each other. So we're going to build a national museum so that all of you can go and really understand what people in the BVI used to experience. We might even have an exhibition room for Mr. Todman, so that he can come with the razor blades and play with some fungi for us, some fungi music. And we can have an exhibition room about all the different instruments we used to. Do you know they even make instruments out of sardine cans? Did you know that? Yeah, they take a gourd, a calabash, and they make instruments. Made instruments out of the things that we had around us in our environment. I would like to see you children, and I'm the Minister of Education, so I'm going to make you do it. I would like to see you children perhaps make an instrument. How interesting would that be? And you could take this instrument around with you and play it for all the different persons. Yeah? And you make your shack. And that'll be your own shack. And when we have cultural celebrations, you can play a shack. And all the different instruments that we made here. That would be so interesting in a national museum. So I'm excited about it, I have to tell you. Let me express my supreme gratitude to the acting director of culture, Miss Ann Leonard, and the rest of the team at the culture department, because of course in our recovery we have not put enough resources into culture, and it's a mistake that we make. We make a mistake of not investing enough in culture, and you'd be surprised that culture just may be the most important thing that we can invest in. Because if you do not have a strong identity, if you do not have a strong sense of yourself, just like Mrs. Vanterpool said, you'll be a tree without roots. And what happens to a tree without roots? It's going to fall down. The roots keep it standing firm and standing straight. And we had some trees that were so firmly rooted that not even Hurricane Irma could knock them down. And we want you to stand as firm as those trees that survived Hurricane Irma, and stand firm in a knowledge of the culture of this place you call home. So I'm so excited and I'm so grateful for the work that the Department of Culture has been doing, and I promise them and I promise the people of the Virgin Islands that we will invest more in the preservation of our culture. It's something that's important. So you can look forward to that. So I've spoken enough. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much, children. No? No? Okay. You're not... I didn't? Okay, good. You're just being nice to me. Okay, so I'm grateful for the presence of you children, because this is really what the work we're doing is all about. So I'm thankful and I'm grateful for you being here. I'm thankful for your teachers and the persons who transported you for allowing you to be here. And let me just say, International Museums Day and Museums Week is something that's very important. I participated in it some years ago when we did a reenactment of the 1949 March. And this year makes 70 years since what we call a Great March. I believe the anniversary is in November. So you can look forward to us perhaps even reenacting the march again sometime in November. It's something that's very exciting. I want you guys really to learn all about it. And we look forward to that happening in the future. So thank you for your kind attention, and may God bless you, and may God bless these beautiful Virgin Islands.
Well, it's the very first time I've seen young people really involved in what a speaker has been saying. It's going to be an exciting week. And as he said, the lab is there. You can go in and really begin to explore how you can look at museums anywhere around the world. This year, the theme for International Museum Week is how do we keep tradition? We decided that we would focus on our maritime life. The word maritime means sea, use of the sea. Obviously, if you're going to be able to use the sea, apart from being able to swim and dive and jump in the water to survive from the fish, you have to be able to design a boat that can take you safely from one place to the other. As two speakers indicated, we used to sail as far north as Bermuda, as far south as Trinidad, as far west as Cuba, and as far east as Barbados. So we clearly had shipwrights, or in other words, boat builders, who could design and craft a boat very successfully. Because when you look at our maritime history or use of the sea, the history of our use of the sea, we had a few accidents Typically, those accidents only occurred because back in those days, as our minister indicated, we did not have modern communication services. So the average mariner, the captain and his crew, they did not know when a hurricane was coming, except when they were virtually within the hurricane. And our history indicates that's when most of our accidents, the few that we had, did take place. We want to invite you to go, once you've been to the lab, we also have the actual exhibition upstairs, so you get a sense of the persons who built the craft,
Like my great-grandfather.
like a minister's great-grandfather. We get a sense of what some of the boats looked like. We get a sense of the courses. In other words, your course is the pathway that you would use to get from here to Barbados, and so on and so on. We want to invite you as well, and please, it's going to be exciting. You know where it's called Long Look? Do you know that? Its original name is Nottingham Estate, but the slaves used to be so tired when they were going home from the fields each night that they used to say to themselves, it's a long look. In other words, it's a long way to get home. I'm exhausted, I'm hungry, I have to be out first thing tomorrow morning. It's a long way. But the Honorable Minister and our minister before, who represented the Long Look district, they've put together a heritage committee. We have with us Miss Vera Potter, and we have Miss Elena Foy. They're here, and they'll be very happy to explain to you. It's like a little museum set up for you just for today from 10 o'clock to 2 p.m. And any day within the week, teachers with your classes, you're welcome to go, and you'll be able to see that from today through Friday from 10 to 2. What you learn there is how, in fact, Nottingham Estate functioned. And as our speakers have said, this is what museums, it's a funny word, museums, but they really allow us to see what used to be, how helpful it would be if we can carry those techniques, those skills into the future. Because except a community is able to feed itself, house itself, and take care of itself, it dies. We'd like to thank all the members of our committee. Ms. Leonard mentioned those persons. We'd like to thank as well Lavity Stoutt Community College, who's represented here by its president, and Bernadine Louis, as part of your faculty, was also on our committee. We'd like to thank all of the schools for making the effort to have the students here, and the staff here from the college have also been very helpful for us today. The other thing that we would like to invite you to do, as we thank you for coming, is to go across to the other side of the campus. You know, campus is the term used for the grounds on which a school is. That's what we mean when we say campus, C-A-M-P-U-S. We'd like you to go across to the other part of the campus and look at an exhibition about Lavity Stoutt. He was the first person to hold the office of head of the internal self-government granted to the Virgin Islands in 1967 by the country called Great Britain, under which we've been colonized since 1666. The point to you going across there is not necessarily to see about Lavity Stoutt, but what I would hope you learn is how each of us may contribute to the welfare of our community. So we'd like you to go across and have a look at that. Maybe Mrs. Bernadine Louis will assist with that.
We're now going to go into the other room where some of you will commence to experience the virtual museum tour. And I'd like to invite the Honorable Minister, President Vanterpool, to please proceed ahead of the students